June 6, 1944, 6:30 in the morning. The fog began to lift along the Norman coast of occupied France, revealing a sight that would shatter the confidence of every German soldier who witnessed it. Through the grey dawn, light emerged an armada so vast, so overwhelming in its scope, that veteran Wehrmacht officers would later describe it as beyond comprehension. Obergefreiter Heinrich Severloh, manning his MG-42 machine gun at Widerstandsnest 62 overlooking Omaha Beach, had awakened expecting another routine morning of Atlantic wall duty. The 20-year-old farmer's son from Baden-Württemberg had never fired a shot in anger. Within hours, he would become known to history as the Beast of Omaha, but in that first moment of revelation, he was simply a young German soldier confronted with evidence of Allied industrial might that contradicted everything the Reich had told him about their enemies. The numbers emerging from the morning haze defied Nazi propaganda that had described America as a divided, weakening nation led by Jewish conspirators and British imperialism as a dying empire clinging to past glory. What Severloh and thousands of his comrades witnessed that morning was the most massive military operation in human history. Over 5,300 Allied ships and landing craft, nearly 10,000 aircraft, and more than 150,000 troops descending upon the Norman coast. This was not the token force of desperate, demoralized democracies that German propaganda had predicted. This was industrial warfare on a scale that revealed the true balance of power in the Second World War. For the German defenders, the psychological impact would prove as devastating as the physical assault. They were witnessing the arsenal of democracy at full strength, and many would never recover from the shock. The morning mist had concealed the approaching fleet until the final moments. German radar operators had detected large formations approaching, but the scale remained hidden until visual confirmation became impossible to deny. Wehrmacht after-action reports document the overwhelming reaction of German observers to the unprecedented naval concentration. Artillery observers telephoned their headquarters with reports of ships extending beyond the visible horizon in organized formations. For months, German intelligence had convinced itself that any Allied invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. The Atlantic Wall's strongest fortifications defended that obvious target. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had inspected Normandy in May 1944, but even the Desert Fox believed the primary assault would strike elsewhere. The deception ran deeper than geography. Wehrmacht intelligence had systematically underestimated Allied capabilities, creating a framework of denial that would collapse under D-Day's overwhelming reality. German estimates suggested the Allies might possess perhaps 2,000 landing craft total for all invasion operations. The appearance of over 5,000 vessels in the assault phase alone demonstrated intelligence failures of catastrophic proportions. Oberst Baron Alexis von Roen, chief of Fremde Heere, West Foreign Armies West, had consistently provided intelligence assessments that underestimated Allied strength. His reports, influenced by Nazi ideology about democratic weakness, portrayed the Allies as incapable of mounting sustained military operations comparable to German efficiency. The strategic miscalculation extended to Allied industrial capacity. German economic analysts had calculated that democratic societies could not achieve production efficiency matching totalitarian organization. This fundamental misunderstanding of Allied economic capabilities would prove more devastating than any tactical surprise. General-Lieutenant Edgar Feuchtinger, commander of the 21st Panzer Division, had scheduled war game exercises for June 6 to practice defending against hypothetical Allied landings. His division commanders were traveling to Rennes for the training exercise when the real invasion began. The irony was complete. While German officers practiced defending against imaginary invasions, the actual invasion was systematically destroying their coastal defenses. Radio communications from the beaches described attacks of such magnitude that senior commanders initially dismissed them as exaggerated panic reports from overwhelmed junior officers. The scale of Allied operations exceeded German theoretical understanding of logistical possibilities during wartime conditions. Wehrmacht defensive reports consistently documented the moment reality penetrated German denial. Observation posts reported Allied landing craft extending beyond the visible horizon in organized waves. German defenders had been trained to expect disorganized attacks by limited forces attempting reconnaissance missions. Instead, they witnessed military precision on an industrial scale. The air war over Normandy revealed the true extent of Allied production superiority that German intelligence had failed to comprehend. Since dawn, German soldiers had watched an endless stream of Allied aircraft, transport planes, towing gliders, fighters providing cover, medium bombers attacking coastal positions, and heavy bombers striking inland targets. The numerical disparity was staggering beyond German comprehension. Allied air assets committed to D-Day totaled 9,901 aircraft, 3,958 heavy bombers, 1,234 medium and light bombers, and 4,709 fighters. 8,268 aircraft were operational and available for D-Day missions. In devastating contrast, the Luftwaffe managed only 319 sorties on D-Day compared to 14,674 Allied missions. This represented industrial superiority of nearly 50-1 in operational aircraft availability. Hauptmann Joseph Priller commanded one of the few German fighter units that managed to engage Allied forces on D-Day morning. His squadron had been reduced to minimal operational aircraft due to fuel shortages and mechanical failures that plagued German aviation throughout 1944. Flying over the Norman coast, German pilots reported aircraft formations larger than any they had previously witnessed. Luftwaffe after-action reports describe formations so large they obscured portions of the sky. German intelligence had estimated the Allies possessed perhaps 4,000 operational aircraft in Britain. D-Day operations revealed this estimate to be catastrophically inadequate. The psychological impact of absolute air supremacy created terror among German ground forces that exceeded physical destruction. Wehrmacht unit reports document the experience of helplessness under total enemy air control. German forces could not move during daylight hours without immediate aerial attack. Communications were severed, supply lines disrupted, and tactical movement became impossible. German defenders discovered that Allied fighter bombers, called Jabos, Jag bomber, by Wehrmacht troops, maintained constant presence over the battlefield throughout daylight hours. American P-47 Thunderbolts, P-51 Mustangs, and British Hawker Typhoons attacked any German movement with devastating effectiveness. The coordination between air and ground forces demonstrated tactical sophistication that exceeded German doctrinal understanding. Allied forward air controllers directed strikes against specific targets with radio communication systems that allowed real-time coordination between services. German forces faced enemies who could concentrate firepower from sea, air, and land simultaneously. More devastating than individual attacks was the complete absence of Luftwaffe support. German soldiers who had fought in Poland, France, and early Russian campaigns remembered air superiority as natural German advantage. D-Day reversed this situation absolutely, creating psychological shock that exceeded physical damage to German defensive capabilities. The sheer quantity of Allied equipment revealed production capabilities that German industrial planners had deemed impossible during wartime conditions. German defenders witnessed material abundance that operated with surplus rather than the scarcity that had characterized Wehrmacht operations since 1942. The logistics statistics alone demonstrated Allied industrial superiority. 7 million tons of supplies had been shipped to Britain for Operation Overlord. 450,000 tons of ammunition exceeded German production for multiple months. The material accumulation represented economic mobilization beyond German theoretical calculations, even under total war conditions. Wehrmacht defensive reports consistently document German shock at Allied organizational capacity. Landing operations proceeded with mechanical precision that exceeded peacetime industrial standards. Ship after ship disgorged men, vehicles, supplies, and equipment in quantities that surpassed German intelligence estimates for total Allied invasion capability. The specialized landing craft astounded German observers who had never witnessed such engineering solutions. LSTs, landing ship, tank, could deliver 18 Sherman tanks directly onto beaches without port facilities. LSMs, landing ship, medium, carried 4 tanks, each with supporting infantry and supplies. The Americans alone deployed over 400 of these specialized vessels. German naval officers had calculated that successful invasion required capturing established ports for supply operations. The appearance of Mulberry harbor components demonstrated Allied engineering capabilities that eliminated dependence on captured facilities. Massive concrete caissons, floating piers, and prefabricated docking systems were transported across the English Channel as complete artificial harbors. More shocking still were the underwater fuel pipelines that connected ships directly to shore installations. The pipeline under the ocean, Pluto, represented engineering solutions beyond German technological imagination. Allied forces were literally bringing their industrial infrastructure across the channel. The technological disparity was most evident in naval gunnery systems. German coastal artillery relied on World War I-era optical range-finding and manual fire control that required visual observation of targets. Allied naval vessels carried radar-directed fire control systems that provided accurate engagement at ranges exceeding visual observation capabilities. German coastal artillery positions at Longues-sur-Mer operated among the most powerful weapons in the Atlantic Wall. These 400 6mm guns could theoretically engage ships 20 kilometers offshore with devastating effectiveness against individual vessels operating without coordinated support. When British warships began counter-battery fire, German artillery crews discovered the technological gap between their equipment and Allied naval capabilities. Wehrmacht reports describe radar-directed fire that achieved accuracy from initial salvos. German guns required visual observation and manual calculations for range and bearing, while Allied systems engaged targets with mechanical precision. Allied naval radar and fire control systems represented technology the Germans had only theoretically imagined. The USS Nevada used radar-directed gunfire to engage German positions from 15,000 yards with devastating accuracy. Each 14-inch shell weighed over 1,400 pounds and could penetrate 6 feet of reinforced concrete. The disparity extended to small arms and infantry equipment that affected every ground engagement. German defenders discovered that American troops carried semi-automatic M1 Garand rifles, while Wehrmacht infantry remained equipped with bolt-action Kar-98 rifles from the previous war. Wehrmacht after-action reports document technological advantages that affected tactical outcomes. Every American squad possessed automatic weapons and radio communication capabilities. They coordinated attacks with precision. German forces associated with elite units, equipped with specialized equipment. German commanders realized these represented ordinary American soldiers equipped better than German elite troops. The numerical disparity in naval forces was overwhelming before considering qualitative advantages. Allied naval forces assigned to Normandy included 7 battleships: USS Arkansas, USS Nevada, USS Texas, HMS Warspite, HMS Ramillies, HMS Rodney, and HMS Nelson. 18 cruisers and 43 destroyers provided additional fire support. Each battleship carried more firepower than entire German coastal defense sectors possessed. The USS Nevada alone fired 337 rounds of 14-inch shells on D-Day, each capable of penetrating any German fortification. German coastal batteries possessed perhaps 50 heavy guns total between Cherbourg and Le Havre. Single Allied battleships exceeded their combined firepower through superior ammunition capacity and fire control systems. More devastating than individual ship capabilities was the coordinated fire control that allowed multiple vessels to engage targets simultaneously with devastating effectiveness. Allied naval gunfire was directed by forward observers with radio communication to offshore vessels. Spotter aircraft provided target correction and damage assessment in real time. The psychological impact of naval bombardment exceeded physical destruction through its revelation of Allied technological and industrial superiority. German defenders experienced firepower that operated without apparent concern for ammunition conservation. Allied ships fired continuously for hours without depleting their magazines, while German forces rationed individual shells. German defenders discovered that Allied communication systems provided tactical advantages that fundamentally altered battlefield effectiveness. Radio networks allowed coordination impossible with German equipment limitations, creating information superiority that affected every engagement. The technological disparity was immediately apparent to German communications personnel struggling with obsolete equipment. Wehrmacht units relied on World War I-era field telephones and unreliable radios, with limited range and constant interference problems that prevented effective coordination. Allied forces demonstrated communication capabilities that exceeded German understanding of battlefield coordination. Every Allied squad possessed radio communication with higher headquarters. Forward observers directed naval gunfire with portable radios that functioned reliably under combat conditions. Air support was requested and received within minutes through radio networks operating across all service branches. Wehrmacht reports consistently document Allied coordination that operated with precision, associated with staff exercises conducted under peacetime conditions. Allied forces communicated simultaneously with ships offshore, aircraft overhead, and ground units beyond visual range, while German telephone lines were severed immediately by artillery bombardment. More psychologically devastating was the discovery that Allied intelligence monitored German communications regularly. Wehrmacht radio traffic was intercepted, analyzed, and used to anticipate German tactical decisions. German defenders realized their enemies possessed information superiority that made traditional defensive tactics ineffective against coordinated assault. The Atlantic Wall, proclaimed as an impregnable fortress, crumbled within hours under Allied assault. German defenders discovered that their fortifications, impressive in Nazi propaganda, could not withstand the concentrated firepower of enemies possessing unlimited resources and advanced technology. The wall had consumed 17 million cubic yards of concrete and 1.3 million tons of steel in its construction. Nazi propaganda claimed it represented the strongest defensive system in military history. German soldiers manning the fortifications believed they occupied positions that could repel any conceivable invasion attempt. Statistical reality was less impressive than propaganda suggested. The Atlantic Wall extended over 1,600 miles of coastline but remained incomplete in many sectors. Normandy fortifications were particularly weak compared to Pas-de-Calais installations. Many positions lacked adequate ammunition storage, communication systems, and supporting infantry. German defensive positions at major beach access points mounted 7.5 centimeter anti-tank guns and MG-42 machine guns in reinforced concrete bunkers. These positions commanded excellent fields of fire over beach approaches and appeared capable of destroying landing craft before they reached shore. Wehrmacht records document initial German confidence in defensive capabilities. Fortified positions could theoretically withstand direct hits from destroyer guns while controlling killing grounds across beach approaches. German defenders expected to eliminate invasion forces attempting to cross exposed terrain under concentrated fire. The preliminary naval bombardment shattered these illusions within minutes of commencement. Allied naval gunfire systematically demolished German strongpoints with precision and overwhelming firepower that exceeded design specifications. The USS Arkansas fired 290 rounds of 12-inch shells at German positions, each shell weighing over 800 pounds. More devastating than individual shell impact was the coordination between naval, air, and land forces that exceeded anything in German tactical doctrine. Allied bombers struck positions immediately before naval bombardment lifted. Ground forces advanced under precise artillery cover directed by forward observers conducting real-time fire adjustment. German bunkers received direct hits from multiple 12-inch naval shells that progressively destroyed their combat effectiveness. Wehrmacht reports describe structures shaking with each impact until personnel could barely maintain positions. Concrete dust filled bunkers, choking defenders and obscuring vision while anti-tank guns were damaged by concussion before engaging targets. German defenders quickly calculated the numerical impossibility of their defensive situation. Intelligence reports had suggested the Allies might attempt landings with perhaps 30,000 troops, supported by limited naval forces. The reality of 150,000 assault troops, supported by unlimited reserves, created mathematical despair among rational commanders. The disparity extended far beyond initial assault forces. German intelligence had calculated total Allied strength in Britain at perhaps 500,000 troops available for invasion operations. D-Day alone involved nearly 3 million personnel in various support roles across all service branches and logistics operations. Wehrmacht divisional reports provide precise documentation of German shock at Allied numerical superiority, exceeding all planning assumptions. By 1400 hours, German observers estimated enemy strength at over 50,000 troops visible on individual sector assignments. This exceeded German estimates for entire Allied invasion forces across all potential landing sites. Radio intercepts suggested similar numbers at each of the 5 landing beaches simultaneously. Allied forces had committed military strength that German intelligence calculated did not exist based on democratic mobilization capabilities and industrial limitations. The replacement mathematics proved even more devastating to German morale than initial casualty comparisons. Wehrmacht casualties could not be replaced due to manpower shortages and training limitations that had plagued German forces since 1943. Allied losses were immediately replaced by fresh troops from seemingly unlimited reserves. Wehrmacht unit reports document the psychological impact of facing endless enemy reinforcements. German forces destroyed entire American companies during defensive engagements, but replacement troops arrived within hours to continue attacks with undiminished strength. German losses constituted permanent degradation of combat capability, while Allied losses represented temporary inconveniences overcome by superior logistics. German soldiers experienced complete air supremacy for the first time in the war, creating psychological shock that exceeded physical destruction. Since 1939, the Luftwaffe had dominated European skies through superior aircraft, pilot training, and tactical coordination. D-Day reversed this situation absolutely with devastating psychological consequences. The psychological effect of helplessness under total enemy air control proved devastating to German morale. Wehrmacht reports document the experience that traumatized an entire generation of German soldiers. Forces could not move during daylight hours without immediate attack by enemy aircraft operating with unlimited fuel and ammunition supplies. Any vehicle that appeared was destroyed within minutes of detection. Any troop movement drew instant airstrikes with devastating accuracy that prevented tactical response or maneuver. German forces were pinned in defensive positions like insects under glass, unable to influence battle outcomes through tactical initiative or strategic movement. Allied fighter bombers maintained constant presence over the battlefield with coordinated attacks that prevented German tactical movement throughout daylight operations. The fuel and ammunition supplies allowed continuous air operations, while German forces could only attempt movement under cover of darkness with limited effectiveness. The coordination between Allied air and ground forces demonstrated tactical sophistication exceeding German doctrinal understanding. Forward air controllers directed strikes against specific targets with radio communication systems, allowing real-time coordination between air and ground services in ways German forces had never achieved. The few German pilots who reached Normandy discovered the hopelessness of engaging superior numbers with inadequate equipment and severely limited fuel supplies. Luftwaffe reports describe engaging squadron-strength formations of enemy fighters with individual aircraft operating on minimum fuel loads that prevented effective combat operations. German pilots maintained experience and tactical skill, but aircraft were outnumbered by ratios exceeding 50-1 while operating with fuel limitations that prevented sustained engagement. German aviation could achieve nothing against overwhelming numerical and technological superiority, supported by unlimited logistics. German defenders discovered that Allied individual equipment exceeded their own in both quality and quantity, revealing industrial capabilities that supported armies with abundance rather than survival necessities. American soldiers carried gear that German troops had only imagined during peacetime prosperity. Wehrmacht reports document equipment disparities observed during close combat engagements where German forces could examine Allied capabilities in detail. Every American soldier possessed equipment superior to German equivalents in materials, design, and functionality that provided tactical advantages. Allied rifles were semi-automatic, while German infantry remained equipped with bolt-action designs from the previous war. American uniforms were waterproof and included specialized items German forces had never encountered: insect repellent, water purification tablets, concentrated rations providing complete nutrition, and medical supplies, exceeding German field hospital inventories. Allied landing troops carried over 60 pounds of individual equipment, including specialized gear designed specifically for amphibious assault operations. Waterproof containers protected ammunition and electronics from seawater exposure. Specialized tools allowed rapid obstacle clearing and fortification construction that accelerated beach consolidation. German infantry had been stripped of non-essential equipment due to material shortages affecting all Wehrmacht operations since 1942. The contrast revealed industrial capabilities, supporting armies with surplus capacity, rather than desperate conservation of limited resources. The casual discarding of valuable equipment shocked German observers accustomed to scarcity conditions throughout the war. American soldiers threw away items that Wehrmacht troops would treasure: waterproof boots after single use, surplus ammunition when weight became inconvenient, medical supplies beyond immediate needs, and rations considered unpalatable. Wehrmacht reports document the psychological impact of witnessing abundance exceeding German quarterly allocations being discarded as routine practice. Allied forces possessed equipment in quantities that allowed waste, while German units fought with inadequate supplies obtained through desperate conservation efforts. German defenders observed Allied logistics operations that demonstrated industrial capabilities beyond their comprehension. The continuous flow of men, vehicles, and supplies across the beaches operated at scales that redefined military logistics and revealed organizational competence exceeding German Staff College theoretical planning. Allied logistics operations had planned for 20,000 tons of supplies daily once beachheads were established. German defenders witnessed supply operations that functioned at industrial scale with specialized equipment designed specifically for over-the-beach operations without requiring captured port facilities. Wehrmacht reports document supply operations that exceeded divisional logistical capacities within hours of initial landings. Allied forces unloaded vehicles, ammunition, fuel, and rations in quantities that would supply German armies for weeks of sustained operations. These operations continued without interruption despite artillery fire and air attacks. The specialized equipment astounded German observers who had never witnessed such engineering solutions applied to military logistics. Amphibious trucks, DUKWs, carried supplies directly from ships to beach depots without requiring docking facilities or cargo transfer operations that German logistics required. Bulldozers cleared obstacles and constructed roads within hours of landing, while prefabricated fuel storage systems provided immediate gasoline and diesel supplies for thousands of vehicles. Liberty ships unloaded directly onto floating piers connected to artificial harbors that eliminated dependence on captured ports. The continuous operation impressed German observers more than initial quantities of supplies. Allied supply systems functioned 24 hours daily, with shifts maintaining constant activity, while German logistics operated episodically when transportation was available and security conditions permitted movement. German supply calculations revealed that Allied supplies visible on individual beaches exceeded Wehrmacht divisional quarterly allocations from German supply systems. Allied logistics functioned with abundance associated with peacetime industrial operations, while war had created permanent scarcity for German forces operating under blockade conditions. German commanders quickly understood that D-Day represented more than tactical defeat, but indicated strategic capabilities that would determine the war's ultimate outcome. The scale of Allied operations revealed industrial and military competence exceeding German capacity for effective long-term resistance. General Feldmarschall Erwin Rommel, commander of Army Group B, assessed the strategic implications within hours of the landing's commencement. His strategic analysis revealed clear understanding of the changed military situation that made German victory impossible through any conceivable tactical or operational approach. Wehrmacht High Command reports document recognition that Allied forces had demonstrated industrial and military capabilities exceeding German capacity for effective resistance. Allied material superiority, combined with German resource limitations and strategic overextension, created conditions guaranteeing Allied ultimate victory regardless of German tactical performance. German staff officers calculated the mathematical impossibility of successful defense against enemies possessing unlimited resources and replacement capabilities that exceeded German total production capacity. Allied replacement capabilities surpassed German manufacturing in every military category, while operating multiple theaters simultaneously. Enemy losses represented temporary inconveniences overcome through superior logistics, while German casualties constituted permanent degradation of combat effectiveness that could not be replaced. This fundamental disparity could not be overcome through tactical excellence or individual heroism alone. The strategic implications extended beyond immediate military concerns to recognition of economic realities determining long-term war outcomes. German commanders understood they faced enemies whose industrial base could sustain unlimited military operations, while German resources approached complete exhaustion under Allied strategic bombing and naval blockade. D-Day revealed the economic foundations of military power that determined strategic outcomes and demonstrated the results of challenging nations whose industrial capacity dwarfed German economic capabilities. Allied economic mobilization had produced military capabilities exceeding German theoretical maximums even under total war conditions. American war production alone surpassed German, Italian, and Japanese combined industrial output by substantial margins that made Axis resistance strategically hopeless. British Commonwealth and Soviet contributions created enemy coalitions with overwhelming material advantages that German production could not match. The statistical comparisons were devastating for German strategic planning and resource allocation. Allied aircraft production exceeded German capabilities by ratios of 4-to-1 or greater, while maintaining quality standards equal or superior to German manufacturing. Tank production favored the Allies by similar margins with superior logistics support. Naval construction demonstrated even more dramatic disparities, with Allied shipbuilding exceeding German capacity by factors approaching 10-to-1, while simultaneously replacing all merchant shipping losses since 1939. German submarine warfare had failed to prevent Allied industrial mobilization from reaching full capacity. German economic mobilization had reached maximum theoretical efficiency by 1944, but could not match democratic industrial capacity operating under free market incentives and unlimited resource access. Material shortages affected every aspect of Wehrmacht operations, while Allied forces demonstrated surplus capacity, allowing waste. The economic reality extended beyond production statistics to fundamental differences in industrial organization and resource allocation systems. German war economy operated under centralized control with efficiency limitations that prevented optimal resource utilization despite totalitarian political coordination. Allied economies combined government coordination with private sector innovation to achieve production levels exceeding theoretical planning while maintaining civilian living standards that supported sustained war effort. Democratic capitalism had proven superior to totalitarian central planning in industrial warfare. The cumulative impact of witnessing Allied industrial might created psychological effects that exceeded physical damage and contributed to ultimate collapse of German military morale. German defenders experienced demoralization that spread throughout Wehrmacht units and affected combat effectiveness permanently. Soldiers who survived D-Day described the experience as shattering their confidence in German military superiority and Nazi propaganda about enemy weakness. The reality of facing enemies with unlimited resources and superior technology created despair, affecting individual combat performance and unit cohesion. Wehrmacht, medical reports, document increasing recognition among German personnel that they were fighting a war that could not be won through any conceivable effort or sacrifice. Allied enemies possessed everything German forces lacked: men, weapons, supplies, and industrial capacity operating at scales that could not be matched. German training and individual courage could not overcome such overwhelming material disadvantages, supported by technological superiority and unlimited logistics. The realization created existential despair about German strategic prospects that affected veteran soldiers more than new recruits. German medical officers reported increasing cases of combat fatigue, nervous breakdown, and psychological collapse following D-Day experiences. The stress of facing overwhelming enemy capabilities created mental health casualties that weakened defensive effectiveness more than physical battle losses. Wehrmacht medical records document soldiers displaying symptoms of hopelessness and despair exceeding normal combat stress reactions. Personnel had witnessed enemy capabilities that convinced them of inevitable defeat, regardless of individual heroism or tactical excellence. The psychological transformation affected veteran soldiers more severely than new recruits, because experienced Wehrmacht personnel, who had fought successfully in Poland, France, and early Russian campaigns, discovered their previous victories resulted from temporary advantages that no longer existed under Allied industrial supremacy. By evening of June 6th, German defenders understood they had witnessed the beginning of Nazi Germany's inevitable defeat. The scale and effectiveness of Allied operations indicated capabilities that would determine the war's ultimate outcome, despite continued German resistance and individual tactical success. Wehrmacht after-action reports reflected fundamental recognition of strategic failure that could not be overcome through military excellence or ideological determination. Unit commanders acknowledged facing enemies whose capabilities exceeded German capacity for effective resistance through any conceivable tactical or strategic approach. German divisional commanders reported witnessing the arsenal of democracy operating at full capacity with industrial strength, technological superiority, and material abundance, creating conditions that guaranteed Allied ultimate victory. German forces were fighting the world's most powerful industrial nations with resources that could not be matched. The German defenders who survived D-Day would spend the remainder of the war confronting the reality they witnessed on June 6, 1944. They faced enemies whose industrial might and material abundance made German defeat inevitable despite tactical skill and individual courage. The shock of D-Day transcended military defeat to become recognition that Nazi Germany had challenged the world's greatest industrial powers with inadequate resources and fundamental miscalculations about democratic military capability. The arsenal of democracy had revealed its true strength through production capacity, exceeding totalitarian efficiency. German survivors understood they were witnessing industrial power that would reshape the post-war world order. The nations capable of mounting D-Day possessed economic foundations that would dominate global development for decades following German surrender and reconstruction. The psychological transformation of German defenders who witnessed D-Day influenced their post-war understanding of democratic industrial capacity and military effectiveness. They had observed conclusive evidence of Allied superiority that contradicted Nazi propaganda and revealed the actual balance of global power between democratic and totalitarian systems. These men carried their experiences throughout the remainder of the war and into post-war reconstruction periods. Their first-hand knowledge of Allied capabilities contributed to German acceptance of defeat and eventual integration into Western alliance systems based on democratic principles and free market economics. The shock of D-Day represented more than military defeat but constituted revelation of democratic industrial might that redefined German understanding of their former enemies. The experience ultimately contributed to transformation of German strategic thinking in the post-war era and acceptance of Western democratic values. The German soldiers who witnessed the Allied Armada on June 6, 1944, had observed the future global order emerging from industrial democracies. They recognized that military power flowed from economic strength and technological innovation that thrived under democratic political systems rewarding individual initiative. Their testimony contributed to post-war German understanding that military effectiveness resulted from industrial capacity, technological advancement, and social organization that rewarded innovation and individual initiative rather than ideological conformity. The arsenal of democracy had proven its superiority through overwhelming demonstration rather than propaganda. The legacy of D-Day extended beyond immediate military victory to validation of democratic principles and free market economics as superior organizing systems for industrial societies engaged in sustained competition. German defenders had witnessed proof that would shape post-war reconstruction and Cold War strategic thinking. The shock of witnessing Allied industrial superiority resonated through German consciousness for generations, contributing to post-war commitment to democratic governance and market economies that emerged from Nazi defeat. The lesson of D-Day was that industrial democracies possessed inherent advantages, making them superior to totalitarian alternatives. The German experience on D-Day became more than military history, but fundamental education in the relationship between political systems and military effectiveness. Democratic societies had demonstrated their ability to mobilize resources, coordinate complex operations, and sustain military campaigns exceeding totalitarian capabilities while maintaining civilian support. This recognition influenced German post-war development and commitment to Western democratic values that emerged from Nazi defeat and occupation. The soldiers who witnessed D-Day learned that democracy was not weakness, but the foundation of ultimate strength in industrial warfare, conducted by free societies operating under constitutional government.